Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into some excerpts today about dynamic facilitation from Rosa Zubizarreta's book, From Conflict to Creative Collaboration.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, and our listeners really intrigued by how this dynamic facilitation thing could help teams like theirs get through those super tough problems.
Right.
The ones that usually just end in everyone getting frustrated.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be interested in that. Seems like a pretty common problem, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. So instead of trying to squash those disagreements, dynamic facilitation, or DF, as I guess we'll call it, actually uses those different opinions
To get to a solution everyone can agree on.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, I guess, sparking creativity from those conflicts.
That's pretty different from what we're usually taught, right? Like, avoid conflict at all costs.
Yeah, totally. So where did this whole DF thing even come from?
Well, the book tells this story about Jim Ruff, a quality consultant. He was working with these sawmill teams.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine.
Yeah, like sawdust flying everywhere, everyone's stressed out.
High stakes.
Totally. And they had these problems that just seemed, impossible to solve.
I bet. So Ruff needed to figure out a way to help them, unlock their creativity and come up with solutions,
That's
right?
Exactly. Solutions that would actually last, not just fall apart under pressure.
So it comes from this really practical setting, not just someone theorizing in, a ivory tower or something.
Yeah, totally. And the interesting thing is, the solutions they came up with using DF, they weren't just quick fixes. They actually stuck around.
Because the team was so invested.
Exactly. They were passionate about it. So you can imagine how powerful that would be in your own workplace, right?
Absolutely. Solutions that everyone's truly committed to from the very beginning. So how is this different from, say, brainstorming? I mean, we've all been in those brainstorming sessions that are just a mess.
Yeah, more like shouting matches sometimes.
Right. And you're told there are no bad ideas, but then if someone raises a concern...
It gets shut down right away.
Yeah, exactly. But DF actually welcomes those concerns about the ideas right from the start.
Yeah, they're seen as valuable insights.
So encouraging that critical thinking from the get-go.
Exactly. Imagine you're working on a project and you have this nagging feeling that something's not quite right.
About the solution that everyone's excited about.
Yeah. In a typical meeting, you might not say anything, but with DF, you're actually encouraged to voice that concern.
Okay, so it's about making sure you're not missing any potential problems, considering all the angles.
Right. And it can lead to a much more robust solution, one that's actually going to work in the long run.
Interesting. So how does DF compare to, a normal facilitated meeting?
Well, in a traditional facilitated meeting, the facilitator is usually trying to steer the conversation, towards a specific goal.
Kind of like they have a destination in mind and they're just trying to get everyone there.
Exactly. But with DF, the facilitator is more like a guide.
Okay, I like that.
They're following the energy of the group, even if it means going in a totally different direction.
So less control, more exploration.
Right. And that openness allows for those aha moments to happen naturally.
Leading to solutions that you might never have thought of in a more, structured environment. That's making me think about some challenges my own team has faced recently.
Yeah, kind of challenges.
Well, we had a really tough time redesigning our team's workflow. We tried brainstorming, but it just turned into this big jumble of ideas.
Yeah.
And no one felt like they were really being heard.
That sounds like a perfect example of where DF could have helped. Remember how we were talking about those concerns?
Yeah.
Well, they're actually the key to unlocking those breakthroughs. Instead of just dismissing those concerns or, negative feedback,
Right.
the facilitator actually encourages it.
I'm still having a little trouble wrapping my head around that. Wouldn't that just make the negativity spiral out of control?
It's surprising, but it doesn't. Think about it this way. When someone raises a concern, it's usually because they actually really care about the issue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So by acknowledging those concerns, you're showing them that, their voice matters.
That they're being heard.
Exactly. And that's when things start to shift. Once people feel heard, they're more likely to be open to other ideas.
And more willing to actually collaborate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So imagine if in your workflow redesign, you had welcomed those initial concerns. It could have led to a much more effective and, robust solution.
Now that you mention it, I can see how that would have shifted the whole dynamic. We might have actually found the real problem with our workflow,
right?
Instead of just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms. So if you're not brainstorming and you're not directing the conversation, how do you actually structure a DF session?
Well, one of the core tools is this set of 4 charts.
Charts.
Yeah. Solutions, concerns, problem statements, and then data perspectives. These charts basically act as a visual map of the entire conversation.
So instead of just like scribbles all over a whiteboard, you have an actual system.
Exactly.
I can see how that would help keep things organized, especially when things get, complicated.
Absolutely. So for your workflow redesign, imagine you have a chart for solutions.
Okay.
Where you just capture every idea that comes up, no matter how crazy.
Yeah.
Then you have a concerns chart where you list like any hesitations or potential problems.
So you're basically separating the what from the but what if.
Right. And then you have problem statements where you distill the core issues based on those concerns. This helps to really focus the conversation,
Instead of just like a million different ideas floating around.
Exactly.
And what about that 4th chart, the data one?
Oh, right. The data perspectives chart.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you gather all the, relevant information, facts, opinions, and experiences that might be helpful.
So bringing in that real world context. Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but it's still a lot to keep track of. What exactly does the facilitator do during all of this?
Well, one of their key techniques is called we-flexion.
We-flexion?
Yeah. It's about like actively listening to what someone is saying.
Okay.
And then verbally reflecting it back to them, clarifying their thoughts and making sure they feel understood.
So it's more than just like nodding your head and saying, you're really showing that you're listening.
Exactly. And that creates a sense of like psychological safety, so people feel more comfortable sharing.
I can see that. So then there's this designated listener role.
Right. This is someone in the group who is completely focused on understanding the speaker.
Wow.
Just imagine if someone in your workflow meeting, their only job was to listen to you.
That would be amazing, actually. Because in our redesign meeting, it felt like everyone was just trying to get their own ideas out there.
Right.
No one was really listening.
And having that designated listener, it can be really powerful, even though it's a small change. All these techniques, the charts, the we-flexion, the designated listener, they all work together to create that safe space for problem solving.
It sounds like it's like the opposite of how we're usually taught meetings should be run, like orderly, efficient.
Controlled.
Yeah. DF seems to really lean into the messiness.
Yeah, the chaos.
And that's where the breakthroughs happen.
Right. Remember that phrase, convergence from chaos, in the book?
I remember that.
A DF session usually starts with everyone just like getting all their ideas out there, no matter what they are.
A purge of ideas.
Exactly. And then it moves into this stage that Zubizarreta calls the yuck stage.
The yuck stage.
Yeah, because it can feel overwhelming, all these different opinions.
I can see how that would be yucky.
But then after that initial discomfort, the creativity starts flowing.
So you don't try to avoid that discomfort. You actually lean into it.
Exactly. And the facilitator doesn't force anything. It just happens naturally as people start to understand each other better.
So there's a method to the madness.
Right. And there's a great example of this in the book. It's about this group of truckers.
They're truckers.
Yeah, they were having this huge logistical problem they couldn't solve. And they used DF. And even though there was all this chaos and disagreement at first, they actually came up with a solution everyone felt good about.
Even without a formal vote or anything?
Right. Okay, so we've talked about how DF works during the session, but what about after the session is over? DF can't just be about talking, right?
How do you turn those insights and ideas into actual results?
That's one of the great things about DF. It's not just a talk fest.
Yeah.
The action plans come naturally from the shared understanding that's been built. Instead of the facilitator saying, okay, here's what we're going to do, the group actually figures out those next steps, together.
So it's about the group taking ownership of the solution, not just being told what to do?
Exactly. The facilitator becomes more of a guide, helping them turn those ideas into action.
I like that, turning inspiration into action.
Exactly. So it goes beyond just solving that one problem, right? It actually changes the way the team works together in the future.
Like building a muscle.
Yeah. Think about those truckers again. Imagine they run into a new problem down the road. They've already learned to value those different perspectives and trust their ability to solve problems together.
So the benefits extend beyond that initial meeting.
Exactly. And the book talks about this hospital group that used DF.
Yeah.
And even the solutions that weren't officially chosen, they still spark changes in different departments.
So it created this ripple effect throughout the whole system.
Right. It's not just about finding the one right answer. It's about fostering this culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not just a meeting strategy, it's like a totally different mindset.
Right. It's about embracing that collective wisdom and creating a space where everyone can contribute.
That sounds like a pretty radical departure from how most teams operate.
It is, but it's
Yeah.
a good kind of radical,
I think so too. So thinking back to that workflow redesign with your team, how do you think DF could have helped you guys avoid those pitfalls?
I think the biggest difference would have been how we handled those initial concerns.
Yeah.
Instead of just like brushing them aside, we could use them to help us come up with a better solution.
Turning those roadblocks into breakthroughs.
Exactly. And, we might have even had some fun along the way.
That's the thing, right? When everyone feels heard and valued, work doesn't have to be such a drag.
Right. Okay, so this circle paradigm thing keeps popping up in the book excerpt.
It does, doesn't it? It seems pretty important.
Yeah, it seems central to this whole DF philosophy. Basically, it's about shifting from a mindset of me versus you
Okay.
to we're all in this together.
So creating a space where everyone feels like an equal participant.
Exactly. Regardless of their role or, how senior they are.
So instead of that traditional hierarchy, you're creating this more like level playing field.
Right. Because everyone has valuable insights to offer.
Yeah,
And the best solutions come when we tap into that, like collective wisdom.
that makes sense. Which makes me think about trust,
Yeah,
It seems like trust would be so crucial for this whole thing to work.
absolutely. Trust is like the foundation of the whole circle paradigm.
Without it, the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly.
It makes sense. If you think back to that workflow redesign we were talking about, the lack of trust was like the biggest problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Everyone was so afraid to, be vulnerable and admit they might be wrong.
Yeah, when people get defensive like that, it just kills the whole DF process.
It prevents the creativity from flowing.
Exactly. So how do you actually build trust in a DF session? It can't just be about telling people to, trust each other.
Right.
It's got to be more than that. It starts with the facilitator. They need to actually be trustworthy themselves.
So they're like modeling that behavior for the group.
Exactly. They need to be authentic, transparent, and really care about, the well-being of the group.
Leading by example.
Right. The facilitator sets the tone for the whole thing.
Like the conductor of an orchestra.
Yeah, exactly. Creating that space where everyone feels safe to contribute.
And a big part of that is listening, right?
Oh, absolutely. Not just hearing the words, but really understanding where the other person is coming from.
Yeah, so deep listening is essential for building trust.
It is. When someone feels like they're truly being heard, it makes them less defensive,
Yeah.
and more open to other ideas.
So it's not just about absorbing information, it's about making that connection with the other person.
Exactly. And it's also about being respectful of different opinions, even when you totally disagree.
Even when you think they're totally wrong.
Yeah. You need to acknowledge that their perspective is valid, even if you don't agree with it.
So you're creating that circle paradigm.
Right, where everyone feels like their voice actually matters.
That they're a valued part of the team.
Exactly. And you also need to be transparent about the process itself.
Okay.
Because DF can feel kind of chaotic, especially if you're used to more traditional meetings.
Yeah, a little out there.
So you need to explain how it works, set clear expectations.
So taking the mystery out of it.
Right. And be open to questions along the way.
Giving people that roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe most importantly, the facilitator needs to be willing to be vulnerable themselves,
Okay.
sharing their own struggles and uncertainties.
So the group sees that it's okay to not have all the answers.
Exactly. It's that we're all in this together feeling.
Yeah.
It humanizes the process.
So it's not about the facilitator being the expert.
Right.
It's about being a guide.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about the facilitator's role in building trust, but what about the participants?
Yeah, what can they do?
Well, they need to be willing to, trust the process.
Even when it feels messy.
Yeah, even when it feels uncertain. Letting go of that need to control everything and trusting that something good will come out of it.
Yeah. That can be hard for people who are used to, being in charge.
It can. But that willingness to, surrender control, that's where the magic happens.
Taking a leap of faith.
Exactly.
Right.
And they need to be willing to be vulnerable themselves,
Sharing their ideas and concerns.
Yeah, even the ones that feel a little scary.
And being willing to listen to others, even when you don't agree.
Right. Showing up with your whole heart, not just your head.
Being present, engaged, and willing to take a risk.
Exactly. And being willing to forgive.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah. Because mistakes will happen.
Yeah.
Feelings will get hurt. But if you approach those moments with compassion,
Right.
it can actually strengthen the trust.
It's about remembering that we're all human.
Exactly. We all make mistakes.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And when you can extend that grace to yourself and to others, that's when you can really connect and collaborate.
This has been like such a fascinating deep dive.
It had.
Dynamic facilitation is about so much more than just meetings, you know?
Yeah, it really is.
It's about how we relate to each other, how we work together.
It's a totally different way of being.
It's a powerful tool for anyone who wants to, you know, tap into that creative potential.
Yeah.
And make work a more fulfilling experience.
For sure. So if you're tired of those boring, unproductive meetings,
Right.
and you're ready for something more engaging,
Yeah.
DF is definitely worth checking out.
We'll put some links in the show notes to the Dynamic Facilitation Associates website and Rosa Zubizarreta's book.
Definitely.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It was fun. Until next time, stay curious and remember, the best solutions often come from the most unexpected places. See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.